faced with complexity, we often, quite logically, try and reduce it to simplicity. But that doesn't work. Simple solutions don't dissolve complex problems. And an analogy that is often used here in South Africa is to discuss complex problems as though they were an elephant. And the question is asked, how do we eat an elephant? And the answer comes back one bite at a time. But of course that's not right. If you try and eat an elephant one bite at a time, you'll get very sick, you'll probably die, the carcass will rot, and the elephant will become an environmental hazard. And if you work in many of the places that I work, somebody will probably steal it from you way before you've eaten it. The only way to eat an elephant is to get 100 hungry animals around the carcass, and to ensure that you have a whole range of different kinds of animals, because if you've got 100 lions, that's not going to work. You need a few lions to bite through the thick skin, but then you equally need the hyenas to pick the bones, you need the vultures to take the meat away, and you need the jackals to come at the end and clean up the ground behind them. So in the complex, social, fragile, vulnerable communities with which my work is focused, the problems that are there are self-perpetuating in many instances. They are problems that we refer to as being a cycle of oppression and violence, neglect and abuse. And we know that very often the things that we try and do to make it work better, to transform those communities, are things that will make a tiny difference here or there, but won't actually deal with the transformation of the whole system to something that is resilient, a place where people can live their best lives, and where people can have opportunities and be safe. So the question that we ask when we deal with these problems, the questions that we ask of the people that we bring together to try and solve these problems, is what does it look like when it's fixed? We spend a lot of time dealing with the problems themselves. We know, for instance, that we neglect children to a very large extent in the first 1,000 days of life, despite the fact that is the simplest, easiest time to intervene, to offer them the best opportunity in their lives. But we know that we neglect them. We know that many children suffer violence and abuse when they are little, and that because many children in our environment suffer these things, we have many children who grow up to suffer, to become abusive, to be neglectors, to be violent themselves. Not everybody who suffers neglect and abuse needs to grow up to be neglectful and abusive, but almost everybody who is that as an adult has experienced it or has been a bystander to it as a child. And yet in our society, for instance, despite that we know this, we have, as the custodians for vulnerable children, less than 13,000 social workers. Yet we have more than 200,000 police to deal with the problems of not having dealt with giving our children a happy childhood. So we bring together many people in different environments to ask the question in response to this complexity, what does it look like when it's fixed? And the way that we deal with it is to ask people to draw a response to what it looks like when it's fixed. And although many of these drawings that I will share with you may seem to be drawings by children, they're not. They're drawings by people of all kinds, in all kinds of settings. And they're drawings that have happened in rural environments, in urban environments, in relatively sophisticated environments, and in very simple environments. And what was very obvious over a long period of doing these drawings is that whereas each single one is different, they are also significantly the same. People know what makes a functional community. So we have endlessly the same kinds of elements coming up. We know that people want safe roads, they want places of order, they want safe and clean toilets. This is something that is very often an issue in our environment and speaks to the basic dignity of people in our communities. Safe and clean toilets. Women will very often draw the moon into these drawings because they hate the curfew that they have to apply to themselves because it's not safe to go out at night. People want shelter. People want a school that is at the center of community, that is a community asset that people can feel proud of, and where children can get the kind of education that will set them up for a life of success and contribution. People want places to play. They want a place where their children and their families can have leisure opportunity together. They want access to basic services and to health care. They want a place to work. Everybody wants to be useful. In our society, usefulness is very often something that is only available to the elite, something that many people are excluded from as being useful in their own transformation. This drawing was done in an environment where we're running a project with Joburg Child Welfare in the inner city. And in a partnership with the city of Joburg. When we first approached the city of Joburg to be a partner on this project, they were quite resistant because in our environment, and particularly in difficult environments like the inner city, the city expects us to come with demands, with anger about promises made and broken. But in fact, this partnership approach that we use in what we call the social transformation system is one that says, how do we leverage each other's mandates? How do we leverage each other's strengths? Where do we find where your vision intersects with mine? And how do we create that space, that shared space, and make it stronger through collaboration? And it's not about me telling you what you need to do. It's about you telling me what it is that you need to achieve. Because for me, coordinated models for working on integrated programs don't really work. The only time we work together is if I understand that I can't achieve what I want to achieve without you, and you understand that you can't achieve what you need to achieve without me. And so that's the approach that we take. What we do is we get everybody to do these drawings, and then we model them. We take their answers, and we go to the research, and we say, are they right? Is this what it looks like when it's fixed? And the way that we do that is to divide up the drawings into 48 little pieces of outcomes that, working together, scoring 4 out of 4, and being green in our software support tool, means that's what it looks like when it's fixed. All these things are in place. They're all working great. We operate on the basis that each one of these elements has 3 simple intuitive indicators, indicators that we've taken from empirical research, but we've translated into things that people know about. People who work in that environment know how good or bad things are, how far we are from what it looks like when it's fixed. The system operates on a simple algorithm, which means that as you score each one of these, others will change color, so that they will actually go progressively from a green, that's what it looks like when it's fixed, to yellow, to orange, to ultimately red. And the further around the system you go, the more likely it is that any particular element would already have been impacted by the negative status of other elements behind it. So that in the inner city, for instance, in Joburg, what we found was that our starting point was 1.5, terrible. 1.5 out of 4. And what that does is it says, if we're going to work together to transform the space, we need to recognize first that where we start from has a very high degree of difficulty. It's hard. And that's something we really need to acknowledge when we're dealing with complex problems. If it was easy to solve them, we'd have done it a long time ago. And I think that very often we don't give ourselves that break. So when we do the scoring process of everybody together participating in understanding how far we are from what it looks like when it's fixed, what we're doing is we're acknowledging, we're starting from a position of deep compassion in terms of how difficult it will be and how much we need each other. The only time it's safe to embrace complexity is when you do it together. You simply can't take it on alone. And that is the only way that we can actually make the shift that we need to make. What we then do is we put each stakeholder into the middle of what it looks like when it's fixed, and we ask them, which of these individual outcomes do you have a role to play in? So that each stakeholder can actually develop their own page, which is then a place where they can go in and say exactly what they bring to each of those elements that they have identified. And then, of course, when everybody's put it in, you can see that you will have a list of the people that you need to collaborate with to achieve any particular outcome in the system. And that's very powerful because it creates a space in which people don't have to operate alone and where they can connect with each other, not on a broad-based idea that what we're aiming to do is to transform a whole complex problem, but that we share a need to work together on a particular outcome or set of outcomes. In the Joburg Child Welfare example, we now have over 100 stakeholders populated into the model. And last Sunday, we had what we called an Island of Optimism, which was a wonderful day of celebration of the power of partnership. Not to say that we've achieved the transformation we need, but to say that together we have the energy to keep going until we do, for the beneficiaries that are the children in the inner city in this instance. On this day when we celebrate Nelson Mandela's glorious life, I think it's really important for us to stop and think about the extraordinary opportunity, the miraculous opportunity that he offered us when he made it clear to us that it is, at a certain point, less important to be able to blame someone for what's broken than it is to be able to commit to working together to fix it. Thank you.